Okay, my name is Judy Showalter, and we're at the McGraw-Page Library in Randolph-Macon College today, March 4th, 2008, as part of the Living Legacies Oral History Project. Today, we're talking with Herb Bailey, who is an alumni of the college and also a member of our development staff. Can you tell us a little bit about how you heard about Randolph-Macon?
Yes. I was finishing my Associate of Arts degree at Lewisburg College and had come home for a weekend to Greenville, North Carolina, where my father was pastor of the church there. There was a gentleman, Marvin K. Blunt, senior class of 1913, standing out on the sidewalk, who had fired up his cigar as soon as he walked through the narthex of the church. As he stood out on the sidewalk smoking his cigar, he called me over to him and said, "Young man, how would you like to go to Randolph-Macon?" And he didn't say college, and I had never heard of Randolph-Macon. And so I offended him, not meaning to, by asking the question back, not where is Randolph-Macon, but what is Randolph-Macon? And he nearly choked on his cigar trying to tell me that he was going to have the president fly down here and pick up my bags. I was going to go see that college. The best 2 years of his life. He ended up going to UNC Chapel Hill for the next 2 years and in graduate school. But so I came home Sunday afternoon and said, "Dad, who is this gentleman who wields such power, a member of your church, that said he was going to have the president fly down here and pick up my bags?" And he said, "Well, son, he probably could do that if he wanted to do that, but why don't you just call the admissions office and get a tour of the campus and so forth. We'll go see the school," which I did, and I fell in love with it. There was no reason for me not to go to Wofford, his alma mater. It was virtually similar in all respects, size and complexity and so forth. But Randolph-Macon just had this intangible that joining that with Marvin Blunt's endorsement for me to come here was the impetus for me to submit my application for enrollment. And the other thing he did say, he wanted me to, in addition to coming to Randolph-Macon, he wanted me to join Phi Delta. I didn't fulfill that portion of his request, but nevertheless, it was. I did enjoy getting to know a lot of the members of Phi Delta.
So you came up to tour the campus. Can you tell us what were your first impressions of the college?
I remember a lot of dirt pathways from one building to the next. I think in retrospect, Randolph-Macon did not have 2 dimes to rub together to keep the lights on, but somehow we did. We had a 50% dropout rate, as I recall. Every year, the freshman class was about 50% of the student body recruited. And I guess that's because, and we also had when the report cards would come home to mom and dad, there was always a piece of paper stapled across the report cards stating that parents, please be advised, academic inflation has not hit the campus of Randolph-Macon. And I always appreciated that because it kind of buffered my grades once mom and dad opened the report cards. My reflections of the college were, it was the old campus represented to me historical significance and roots that lend itself to being, a culture, a heritage was already here, and I was joining an older institution, being a part of that, and I wasn't real thrilled with the dorm situation. My only other experience was to see East Carolina University, where I was, the hometown where I was, and dorms were completely different there than they are here, so I didn't really have any expectation there. Classrooms, I really didn't have any preconceived notions of that, so I was pretty much wide-eyed and and appreciative of the facilities coming from Lewisburg College, another Methodist school, which had a more difficult time with enrollment because they have to recruit every year they're replacing 50% of their student body. So I was just pleased to have an opportunity to come to a great liberal arts college like Randolph-Macon. Just had a great reputation, and my first reaction was very positive, and the people is what made it the difference for me. It was everyone I was introduced to showed me that they were personable and they really did care about who I was, and that they gave me a sense of belonging, and that opened the door for me.
You had finished your associate's degree, so
Yes.
you did not come in as a freshman?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I was somewhat displaced because as a junior, I was allocated dorm space in Bennett Hall. So all the freshmen were, that's the furthest away from the core of campus, and generally the underclassmen, were put as far away from class for convenience purposes. And so I was among all the freshmen as a junior. It wasn't until I moved to Irby my senior year that I began to, in terms of where you live, I began to be more infiltrate and mix with my classmates more. And it was as a result of moving to Irby, all the guys that I hung out with on the end of the hall were all Phi Kappa Sigma fraternity brothers. And in fact, my RA right across the hall, Ben Norfleet, became my big brother, and he's a year younger than I am. I joined my senior year. I joined Phi Kappa my senior year, so a bit unusual, but the way they couched it to me is, you've played in a band that our fraternity is composed of all fraternity members, and you've never taken any money out of the coffers, and we'd really like for you to join. And I couldn't afford it, and they said they would pay my membership. So I had some reservations about that initially, but they said no, it's something what they'd like to do for me. So I was honored and humbled by that offer, and today I'm serving as secretary of Phi Kappa Sigma organization. So I guess there's in retrospect, I'm really glad that they talked me into joining. And they also said that they were going to take it easy on me as we pledged, but they did not. So an enjoyable experience nevertheless.
Even though back then they had Hell Week, huh?
Yes, Hell Week was definitely Hell Week.
What about other activities besides fraternities? What other activities were on campus, and what other activities did you participate in?
The Kern Center Council, I played tennis on the tennis team. In fact, that was one of the draws to come here. Wofford offered me scholarship, and Randolph-Macon did also, and it wasn't much. I mean, we were Division II, but it was enough to, I guess it stroked my ego to say, they want me. They're putting some money on the line, and I have a chance to play up the ladder, which I was fortunate to play number one the 4 years I was in college, just because I probably would not have made the team on a big university, but at a small school in Division II, I could play competitively, and that was a very rewarding experience for me.
You mentioned the Kern Center Council.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the Kern Center?
I don't recall. That my memory's fading. I remember being engaged in that, but I don't recall the work that we did. Or, to me, it was probably my attempt to be engaged a little more socially since I was so disengaged in some ways from everything else, because I didn't bond with my freshman class first 2 years, and then my third year I was residentially displaced, and my fourth year I was so busy I changed my major between my junior and senior year from religion to philosophy based on Dr. Panel's my interest in his in him and in the course work that he was teaching, and I had to do a lot of makeup work. In fact, I took 2 courses in State University in New York at Fredonia while I was a King's Daughters and Sons organization scholarship recipient to study at Chautauqua Institute, and SUNY sent professors over there. So I was able to make up 6 hours during that summer. And the other one was quite interesting. My senior year, I was leaving for Christmas, and my advisor, Dr. Panel, said, "Hey, Bailey, you realize you're going to be 3 hours short of graduating on time?" And I said, "No, sir, please tell me you're joking." And he said, "No, I've done the math. You're going to have to make up 3 hours somewhere, or you'll graduate, I guess, next year." And that didn't set well with me, considering my father had always told me that if I didn't graduate in 4 years that I would be paying for it. So he said, "I don't know any other alternative, but VCU does offer a Christmas Intercession Cram course. It's a 10-day course that starts December 26th and goes through January 5th. He said, I think they're offering an anthropology course, and all you need is an elective, so if you want to do that, you can." So I enrolled in that immediately. In the first 3 days of driving into Richmond with my beat-up old MGB convertible was my car overheated on the same hill going down US 1 as I was going into Richmond. Every day it overheated on the same hill going downhill, and I would coast into this Century 21 real estate office, and every day they would have by the second day they just had the jug out for me to use to fill up my radiator with water. And on the third day, the gentleman offered me a job. He said, "You seem like a pretty nice fellow, and you're ambitious to get this work out of the way, and come back. We'd like to give you a job when you get your degree." But I didn't do that, but was flattered by the offer. It was kind of a humorous moment.
So you changed your major between your junior and your senior year.
Yes.
And that. Can you talk a little bit about that and about Dr. Panel?
Sure. I guess I was following religion as a course of study based on my father being a Methodist pastor, and I had some affinity with who he was, and some identification that prompted me, I suspect, to go into that as a area of interest. And one of the courses that I had in religion was Asian studies emphasis, Asian studies religion, and Asian religions, that is. And I also had a philosophy course taught by George Lucas, and that was particularly, it may have been a paradigm shift to a degree, and I don't want to give him all the credit for that, but because Dr. Panel was the steady force in my life that when I was here as an advisor that had as much to do as George Lucas. But I will add this, and this speaks to the type of institution that Randolph-Macon is, and the people who encompass and embody the life and spirit of the college. George Lucas was here for a short while, great teacher. The bell rang one day. We had not finished with our class in terms of the conversation that was in the dialogue that was going on. There were only 5 philosophy majors on campus, by the way, and I think there were maybe 6 or 7 people in this particular class. It was 18th or 19th century thought. And he proposed that if anyone wanted to continue the conversation, because it was obvious we were all engaged collectively in some abstract concept out of the room experience kind of a thing. And so he offered to have the grill going in his backyard for us to bring whatever meat we wanted to throw on the grill. He would have salad and drinks to bring our lawn chairs and guitars or whatever we wanted to bring over, and we would finish our conversation. And we all did. And what is insightful about that experience is the fact that here's a professor who's inviting us to his personal home on his own time, beyond what he does for instructional or office hours. And the students also gave of their personal time outside of the classroom when they could be doing other extracurricular activities to go over to his house and further engage in conversation relating to an academic subject that we weren't finished with in the classroom that day. So it was quite impressive, and I've reflected on that quite a few times over the years. And seems to be the hallmark of the hand cultivation experience that can only be achieved at a small liberal arts college like Randolph-Macon College.
Who were some of the other faculty members or administrators that had an impact on you?
B.J. Seymour, who taught religion, and I just learned this past week, sadly, that she's been diagnosed with dementia. And that saddens me greatly. She's always been a pioneer as a woman, as a faculty member, terrific leader, great student mentor for students, and extraordinary woman. Just, others, Bob Offenbacher, I had for logic, made a D in his class, by the way. And so it was part of a major requirement. I had to take it over again, which is where I was introduced to Dr. Panel, because he also taught logic, but from the philosophical perspective and not the mathematical. And I am numerically challenged, probably stronger in abstract concepts than empirical data, for sure. So I guess it was, I have Bob Offenbacher to thank for giving me a D, because I was introduced to Burnell Panel, and he subsequently became my advisor as a result. So he made an impact on me. George Lucas, I mentioned. Bill Reinhardt, I had for history of China, history of India. What impressed me about him is he's just an extremely intelligent individual. I believe he's a Fulbright scholar. A bit eccentric to a degree, maybe. He collects things from all of the countries that he's traveled, and he exposed us, fortunately, to some of the foods of India, and he brought relics from home that he had collected from his personal effects that intrigued me about the Asian religions, and that prompted my interest in the in taking Asian religions, actually. So that's pretty much it for those that are. Oh, I should not forget Helmut Werner, who was my tennis coach, and I'll recall the first thing he said to us when he came out on the courts first day was, he said, every one of y'all might be able to whip me on a tennis court in a game, but he said, you're going to be in shape by the time the first match starts. He meant it, and he delivered. We were definitely in shape. In fact, he used to hold us, he would make us run suicides right to the very end. The cafeteria closed at 6 o'clock, and he would make us run until 5:58, knowing that it took two minutes to sprint to the cafeteria. And of course, when you've been working out so heavily, food is not very attractive. You know, you're sweating onto your tray of food as you go down the line to pick your items to eat. And the peanut butter and jelly bar was my favorite, I guess, because you could take it back to the room. I'd always get an ice cream cone, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and take off back to the room and get my books and go to the library, study.
And to put this in perspective now, the cafeteria you were in is not the SD's cafeteria we now know.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
You were in
what's now the coaching annex. In fact, I was a federally funded student worker working in the cafeteria as part of my financial package to come to school. So I was the chief bottle washer, bringing the plates off the trays off the dumbwaiter and scrubbing them down and getting ready for the sterilization machine. That was my role as a worker on campus, in addition to playing tennis, and that's how I earned my way.
I don't think we've talked to anybody who worked in the cafeteria. I always knew there were students who did, but
Right.
I don't think we've talked to anybody who did.
Well, it's a bit interesting. Things were different then on the cafeteria line. We had, as I recall, I know we had one meat. We may have had two. I don't recall. There was a lot of choices. I think it was maybe one meat and a choice of 2 or 3 vegetables. And there was always bread. And there was a small table for salad. And then there was a small station or table for peanut butter and jellies. And then there was the ice cream vat. But that was pretty much it. And for me to hear a student today say, gosh, the food is not as good as it used to be, or we don't have any choice. Of course, I've never heard that, but if I did, I would be quick to tell them the way things used to be. You hate to have someone older say, well, when I was, we walked backwards in the snow 9 miles to get there. I hate to do that, but
I feel both ways.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the other experience I had in the cafeteria was when I came off the tennis court one day. There was a camp counselor recruiting, or there was a camp director who was recruiting camp counselors for Camp Winalki on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. And I did not have a summer job lined up at that point. It was in January, February, as I recall, when they came to recruit. And so I signed up to go and do this, teach tennis. And the owners were a Jewish family. Sobel, S-O-B-E-L was the last name. The 2 sons, and one of them was there recruiting, both graduated from UNC Chapel Hill, but one of them had come to Randolph-Macon for a 2-year stint prior to going to Chapel Hill, and so they made a token stop at Randolph-Macon before going to Chapel Hill to recruit all of the counselors for this all-Jewish camp of campers. And so we had a running joke once we got up there that all of the kids were Jewish and all of the counselors were Protestants from North Carolina. And it was an interesting dichotomy, or maybe that's not the right word, divergence of affluence between the campers and the counselors.
Mm-hmm.
And there was not a Volkswagen in the parking lot when the parents came to drop them off or pick them up. Let's just leave it at that. I could tell you more stories about that. Pretty interesting, though. But so the cafeteria was it was a place that not only provided me an source of income, but it launched me into another career experience, teaching tennis. And I was the low man on the totem pole. The rest of these guys were number 1 and number 2 from nationally ranked High Point College, won the NCAA tournament that year, And the other two guys were from Wichita State, #1 doubles team there. So I didn't feel worthy just to pick up the balls behind them. But I learned quite a bit tennis instruction that year. And it's a great experience being in New Hampshire. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you did after graduation?
I'm not sure we have that much time. I'll be brief, and then you can tell me if there's anything that piques your interest. I went to work for a men's clothing store immediately after I came back from the camp counseling experience over the summer. I had sort of a surreal experience, I guess every student does, when you feel like you're supposed to be back in school, but you're now responsible for getting a job and changing your venue and changing your mode of operation. Everything changes. And I got an offer I was about to go hike the European Alps with a friend who worked at the same store, and we had bought our boots and started mapping out our course and so forth. And this gentleman who was the president of the local hospital came in and offered me a job I couldn't refuse. And I had to disappoint my friend by saying, I went home and told my mother I had a white-collar job offer today, and she was so elated. I couldn't disappoint my mom. At that point it was my friend or my mother, and I guess she was going to have to win there. I wasn't at the point where I was willing to swim against the tide, but I don't regret it. I started making $9,500 the first year out of school. I had colleagues that were making 16 or better, but it was a professional opportunity, and it was an opportunity for me to learn medical business, and it was a public relations position. I became their first executive director and created a foundation. Got me in the fundraising business right at 79, and I'm still doing that today, 28 years later. So obviously had an impact on me. And I went from working at Pitt Memorial Hospital as executive director of their foundation to going to seminary, being a pastor for 5 churches, and Duke Endowment internships in various places, and then the Boy Scouts of America in 3 different states, and then the American Diabetes Association as director of the development for their statewide affiliation in North Carolina, and then the United Methodist Retirement Homes in Durham, North Carolina, before going to East Carolina University to be the director of Plan Giving prior to coming here to Randolph-Macon in 2000. And I've been here 8 years now, serving in that capacity, director of Plan Giving.
So other than coming back, how did you stay in touch with the college while you were gone?
I did not. And it wasn't because I did not want to. It's just we didn't have the tools in place electronically during that time that we do today, where alumni could self-identify and stay connected. And I moved quite often, working for nonprofit organizations all of my life. Did not, I suspect if I had ever gotten a publication or a letter of any kind from the college during a 20-year span that I was disengaged, it would have prompted me to re-engage and to let them follow me, so to speak. That's a regret I have, I suppose. And I don't have many regrets in my life, but missing out on contributing to the annual fund all those years, when now I'm the staff advisor to the 50th reunion classes every year, and I see gentlemen in friendly arguments even debating who has given the longest. And that brings about and instills in me a sense of pride that they've experienced, and they're 25 years beyond my experience. So I probably will regret it further as the older I get, based on what I see these gentlemen absorbing and reflecting. So, and also I should say that 20-year disengagement also distanced me from some of the classmates that I might have otherwise kept up with, and that might have also kept me further engaged with the life and the spirit of the college.
You have mentioned your fraternity.
Yes.
And that you're active with them now.
Yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Yes. I might preface this by saying, to regress just a bit, by saying that there's not a single photograph of me in any of the class yearbooks recorded. No fraternity picture, no tennis team picture, no class picture. And I don't recall being aware that there was a photo op that I just said, forget it, don't go there. I didn't purposely avoid it, but if it weren't for the sheepskin hanging on my wall and the registrar's records, people would question, did you really go to Randolph-Macon College? Back to your question about the fraternity. Tell me again. My memory's so short here.
What do you do with them?
Oh,
What's your role?
I am the scholarship chair for their efforts. Help them to raise funds to bolster the Phi Kappa Sigma scholarship that has been created to provide financial assistance to primarily legacies of Phi Kappa Sigma fraternity members as a preference, and then the college has the ability to grant it to anybody they want to grant it to beyond that, but if they don't find a recipient. But that it aligns itself with my professional position here as well, being a fundraiser, so it's something I know something about, and I suspect the other officers saw that given my position here, it was an easy correlation to make to get me in that position to help the fraternity. Being secretary is something I did not ask for. In fact, I had preferred not to be secretary and had made that known, but the gentleman who is heading our group now, Dave Shepherdson, if you know him, he is doesn't take no for an answer, and in fact, I was assisting them to order the stationery to letterhead to send out the appeals to raise the money, and the last point of contact with the printer that I had set up with was for Shep to email the list of names of the officers that he wanted to be included on the side of the letterhead. And so I didn't see any of the formatting of anything until it was shipped to my office, and I opened the box, and there was my name listed as secretary. So I told him I was quite surprised, given that I told him that I could not and would not serve as secretary. But I suspect, again, he felt for some reason I was the right person for the job, and I told him I would do what I could do until he was able to secure a bona fide secretary. That's what whatever I can do to help the fraternity. Right now we're in recolonization efforts. In fact, tonight there's a meeting. I believe it was canceled, but at any rate, there was a meeting to discuss the recolonization and attract interested students to participate in that meeting to hear about the plans for rolling out the recolonization over the next year. So we're quite excited about Phi Cap coming back on campus. It does have I think 135-year history here at Randolph-Macon.
Those are all of my questions. Are there any thoughts that you would like to share about Randolph-Macon?
Well, I haven't talked about Burnell Panel, who's probably probably the key to my comfort being here, he was a terrific role model, sports enthusiast, so he related to my tennis prowess to a degree, and he and my father had similarities that were uncanny, at least from my perspective. So in many ways, I left home, my biological father, and I arrived on Randolph-Macon campus only to find almost a surrogate dad, or maybe that's not the best word, but certainly a father figure in Burnell that was comforting and encouraging and inspiring in all respects. He was constantly uplifting me and took a real care in not only me but in all of his students. He was quite a unique person. And I didn't know if this is something you may have an interest in, but to that end, I wrote a prose and gave it to Mary Alita Panel as a thoughtful gesture, just to let her know that Burnell was remembered and still continued to be remembered by the in so many ways. And I'll just read this to you. It's entitled, "In Retrospect, Memories of Dr. H. Burnell Panel," by Herb Bailey, class of '79. My earliest childhood memories of Dad came in large measure from my experiences sleeping upright against his chest. I can still smell the distinct aroma of his pipe tobacco and feel the scratchy fibers of his favorite tweed sport coat against my soft cheek as he held me in his arms while writing his next sermon. Dad was always driving hard to complete the next priority on his pastoral responsibilities as a Methodist minister. As I grew up, I sought his counsel and favor. Eventually, I headed off to college, not for me, but because I knew he expected this of me. I entered Randolph-Macon College and met my new faculty advisor. I felt like I had never really left home. I found a family community at Randolph-Macon. In fact, I found the same fatherly presence in my faculty advisor that I had experienced my first 18 years of life at home. Dr. H. Burnell Panel was indeed more than a faculty advisor. Like my dad, he was a man of wisdom, integrity, and devotion who was in pursuit of scholarly knowledge and in constant search of its practical application. Dr. Panel was graciously empathetic of all of his students' orientation at Randolph-Macon. He was not judgmental or critical in his remarks. On the contrary, he had a gentle way of correcting his pupils. He instilled leadership, challenged the analytical skills of those he mentored, and always brought about the positive perspectives in each unique circumstance. He possessed a genuine caring and an encouraging attitude that was sure to be contagious to anyone willing to engage him in conversation. It was coincidental to me that both Dad and Dr. Panel earned graduate degrees from Duke University, favored tweed sport coats, smoked pipe tobacco, and had the same stern expression on their faces whenever listening to others' concerns. It was not coincidental that I came to Randolph-Macon College, majored in philosophy, and received student advising from Dr. Panel. In retrospect, Dr. Panel became a part of my life through a special mentoring relationship that goes beyond the classroom and has influenced me in becoming the person I am today. John Bunyan once said, "You have not lived until you've done something for someone who can never repay you." I can state with unequivocal assurance that Dr. H. Burnell Panel lived every day of his life in the kindred spirit of giving to others, gifts that can never be repaid. I am forever grateful for having learned many of life's lessons from this great man, and am confident that his spirit lives on through others who have experienced the same. Thank you.
And thank you for coming today.
My pleasure. Thank you. The 20-year disengagement I had was brought to a halt by virtue of being working at East Carolina University and receiving a call from Mike Carter, who he had talked with Deal Tompkins, who I had run into at a conference in Baltimore, Maryland, about 3 months earlier, and Deal told me he was going to hang his shingle out. Well, he was leaving Randolph-Macon, and that I was the only other alumnus that he knew that had any experience in plan giving, that I might ought to look at the job. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested in taking a look at it. And so the next thing, Mike Carter calls me and said that Rusty Martin had asked him to call me to and find out what it would take to blow me out of Greenville. Those were his words. And to me, it was an opportunity to come to work for my alma mater first and foremost. It was I was perhaps in a more diverse, larger institution and more segmented. So coming back here meant I would be wearing more hats, doing more major gift work as opposed to the plan giving work. But the opportunity to work for your alma mater is a pretty powerful force in making a decision, and that was the basis on which he captured my information and apparently gave it to Susan Donovan, and it was, I was back on the database at that point, and I began getting emails from Susan, trying to re-engage me in the life of the college, and that's pretty much how that happened.